All right, welcome everybody to this informational session for the Urban Agriculture Conservation Grant Initiative through NACD for fiscal year 2022. We're excited that you could join us today. If you could please keep yourself muted through the duration of the call, we'd greatly appreciate it. We have a welcome from NACD's leadership to start today's session, and then we'll move through a presentation and then address questions and answers after the presentation as well. So thank you again for joining us. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Rich Dusterhouse to provide a few words of welcome. And Rich, if you could introduce yourself as well, that would be helpful for our audience.
Well, thank you very much, Ariel, and it's my pleasure to be with you all this afternoon as a representative of NACD's executive team. Two of our other executive team members are on, and Carla may speak a few words as well, but Jen Nelligan is on. Jeremy is tied up with some other duties this afternoon, so I don't expect him on, but we have also a couple of new employees on that are getting an opportunity to learn about this particular activity of NACD. And I want to say just a couple words about the timeliness of conservation districts work in this space. These last several years, with the growing interest in raising fresh food close to home, reviving what many of us grew up with as young people, having our own gardens, there has been a restoration to that kind of activity, including, I would say, not surprisingly, around many communities, particularly communities that are more urban, where they, for perhaps decades, had given up the thought of agricultural conservation and raising food and taking care of their soil and those kind of things. So it's a very timely place in history for NACD to be able to offer the kind of programs that Ariel will be speaking to in more detail later on in this webinar. So I think if our Chief Operating Officer, Carla, is on, for many of you, we have 4 teams at NACD, and she leads 2 of the teams. Jen Nelligan, also from our executive team, leads the other 2 teams. We agreed that not all of us would speak, but Carla, if you wanted to say a word or two, maybe without even coming on screen, that would be fine.
Thank you, Rich. And hi, everyone. I'm just kind of recovering here from a cold over this past weekend. Thank you, Ariel, for putting this together. I really do appreciate it. Rich's comments and just in the important work that our urban program and the work that you all are doing is just super critical to our districts and our organization. So I just look forward to hearing from folks as we go through this webinar. But again, just a really strong thank you from our organization and our leadership and all the great work that you all are doing.
Excellent. Thank you, Carla. And I want to echo what Rich has said. We do have multiple staff members from NACD on this call with us today. So if at some point all of you could turn your cameras off if you're capable and just give a quick wave to our audience to let everyone know that you're here to support them, we'd greatly appreciate that as well. I see Terrence, Jen, I know we have Mariah, a few others as well. So thank you everyone again for joining us. Now I'm going to pass it to Ron Rohall, the acting chair of our Urban and Community RPG, who helps manage many of our urban and community conservation activities, for a few words as well. Ron?
Well, thank you, Ariel. And I just want to thank everybody for attending this webinar, expressing your interest in urban ag, the urban ag grants. It's my pleasure to have been involved in these for the past 5 and now for the 6th urban grant. This is just an exciting opportunity that keeps continuing. And we got the first one, and I think it was 2016. It was like, oh God, this is phenomenal. Hope we can continue. And it's just exciting to see the programs that were offered, the grant applications that come in. And I just want to say thank you. And I also want to express my thanks for the long time support of this program. It's all come through our partner, the Natural Resources Conservation Service and RCS, and without them, we couldn't do this. So I want to say a great big thanks to them and to all of you for the fabulous ideas that you put out there and the innovative things that are happening. So thank you, and I'll turn it back to Ariel.
All right, great. Thank you, Ron. So I'd just like to throw a reminder out to everybody, if you could please make sure to keep yourself muted throughout the duration of the call. That'll be helpful for me as we go through a quick presentation here to roughly go over the program and some of the background of this initiative, and then some of the key aspects of the application that all of you should be aware of, and then we'll wrap it up with questions from our audience after we get through this presentation. If you have any questions at any time, please feel free to throw those in the chat box as well, and we'll try and address those after the presentation. All right. So first, I know many of you are very familiar with NACD, but I just want to give a rough reminder of our mission statement. I like to do this at the start of all of our presentations just to emphasize again that we're all working on a variety of issues and hopefully working on those issues together. So NACD's mission, like many of your individual conservation districts, is to promote the wise and responsible use of natural resources for all lands by representing locally led conservation districts and their associations through grassroots advocacy, education, and partnership. So primarily at a 30,000 foot level, we are the unified voice, the unified national voice for conservation districts nationally. And essentially what that means is we have an elected member-driven board of directors that help us select priorities, one of which a number of years ago, as Ron mentioned, is urban and community conservation. And we like to work to secure adequate federal funding through a variety of avenues to support all of your work, again, which is how we ended up with this grant program. So the way that we do a lot of our work is by breaking the country up into 7 regions nationally. So while I manage our urban and community conservation activities, my primary duties are as our Pacific region representative. So regardless of where you are in the country, whichever state or territory that you reside in, you have an individual who can help you navigate all of our grant programs, this one, as well as our TA grant program, our Friends of NACD District Grant Program, and the variety of membership services that we offer to all of you, including our new insurance program. So you don't need to memorize these names if you're new to our region structure. I'll definitely send this presentation around, but keep these individuals in mind as excellent resources for you for all of your work within your conservation district. So the bulk of our work falls into several sort of lines of activities. We do grassroots advocacy on behalf of conservation districts, which includes testimonies to Congress. We do a spring fly-in in March. We also have a lot of news that we provide to not only conservation districts, but also our partners and the general public, et cetera, about conservation issues, as well as conservation district activities. We provide a lot of membership services, for example, training and educational resources, our new insurance program that I mentioned as well. We also have a huge wealth of education resources available for not only K through 12, but also the general public, et cetera. And we host a variety of events, including webinars, our annual meeting, which has great breakout sessions related to urban and community conservation, as well as a variety of other conservation issues as well. All right. And so I want to touch briefly on our advocacy efforts, because part of how we ended up with our Urban Ag Conservation Initiative was through our resource policy groups, which are essentially 6 committees focused on specific topical areas. We have one focused on forestry, one on coastal, tribal outreach and partnerships, public lands, and invasive species, in addition to our urban and community RPG. And each of these groups focuses on specific activities like support for legislation, publications and reports, learning opportunities, and again, district funding opportunities. So I like to go through this background just so all of you can somewhat understand how we have this grant initiative and where it fits within the structure of NACD. Now we're going to get into the bulk of why all of us are here, which is to learn more about our urban and community work, and specifically our Urban Ag and Community Conservation Grant Initiative. And again, if I could ask everyone to please keep themselves muted, that would be helpful for me as we're going through this presentation. So briefly, to get back to, again, our urban and community work, we have on our website a specific page that's focused on urban and community conservation, where you'll find a wealth of resources and reports that are relevant to conservation districts, as well as a lot of information about this grant program, including the RFP, which hopefully all of you reviewed before you joined us today. So on that page as well, we link to our monthly webinars. These are always on the third Thursday of every month at 4 p.m. We have one this Thursday on collaborative invasive species management. And the reason that I wanted to mention this before we get into the grant program is because a lot of our speakers are previous grantees and they discuss their programs. So our backlog of webinars, our archives, which is mostly on YouTube right now, provides a lot of opportunities to learn from other districts in terms of how they've used these grants and how they've built their programs through time. So again, if you go on our webinar page, you'll see the archive. I especially want to point out one that we did in October on the USDA Office of Urban Agriculture and Innovative Production. So Rich mentioned at the start of this session that there's a lot of interest and activity going forward in urban and community agriculture, and we'll continue to see this over the coming years, especially from the USDA. And this webinar touches on many of the grant opportunities for conservation districts, as well as several partnership programs that I think would be really helpful for all of you if you're not familiar to understand some of the activities that USDA is looking at for the future. All right, so now we're going to talk about the grant program, which again is why everyone is here. So for fiscal year 2022, we have $900,000 available for conservation districts and tribes to conduct activities through this program, with proposals due January 31st. So since 2016, we've awarded $5.6 million for over 100 projects in 35 states. So as Rich and Ron both mentioned as well, this is through an ongoing agreement with the Natural Resources Conservation Service. So NACD, of course, is very thankful for their support for this program. And essentially, through their conservation operations program, this grant program allows us to provide opportunities for conservation districts to conduct technical assistance related to urban and community programs, but each year the funding is subject to availability. So anyone that's proposing a project through this program should make sure that their proposal focuses on conservation technical assistance and community-oriented and small-scale agriculture conservation projects. So we're increasingly trying to focus this, even though we call it the Urban Agriculture Conservation Grant Initiative, we're trying to focus on the community-oriented and small-scale aspects of this program, because rural districts are also eligible to apply. So we don't want you to think that if you're in a community of, say, 500 people, that you aren't eligible for this grant. You can still do work related to urban and community-oriented agriculture. Related to food security, school gardens, beginning farmer training programs, backyard livestock education, all types of learning opportunities, learning gardens, demonstration gardens, small scale conservation practices, etc. And it's important to note that we have an excellent story map on our website, the Urban and Community Conservation website that I showed a few slides ago, that shows all of the previous grantees through this program. So if you click on the map on that webpage, you can go through and see what states have received grants previously, click on the district, learn more about their programs, see pictures, etc. And this is by far one of the best resources available to all of you as you're looking to start your program or think about what type of funding or what type of activities could be funded through this, this grant initiative. And again, the webinars. I just want to emphasize this just because these webinars are a fantastic resource for most districts regarding any aspect of outreach, underrepresented communities, etc. So definitely take a look at these as well. There's a lot of great programs that we featured previous grantees through these webinars as well. All right, so now I'd like to touch on eligibility for these grants. So any conservation district as defined by state statute may apply, or tribes and tribal conservation districts. So these are the only organizations that are eligible for this grant. Previous grantees who have completely finalized their project are also eligible for one additional grant only if they have completely completed their previous project. So we must have a final report on file for your first grant before you're eligible to apply again. So this year, for those of you that are familiar with this program, typically we've granted out $50,000 for various projects. This year, we have opened a new channel of funding, which we are calling planning grants. So applicants that are new to the urban agriculture and community agriculture space may apply for up to $10,000 to conduct community needs assessments, partnership development, or other planning activities related to building a long-term urban ag program. So essentially what these grants are for to, if you're at that point where you want to get something going, but you aren't necessarily sure what that looks like or what who the partners would be or what those activities would be that you would even do. Essentially, this $10,000 would provide you an opportunity to use staff time or a consultant to seek out partners, answer some of those questions about how do I get going, and then how can I proceed through this program. And ideally, this grant would set you up well to then apply for an implementation grant in the future, which are our traditional UAC grants. So those are up to $50,000 to conduct activities, again, related to all of those aspects that I mentioned before: food security, underrepresented clients, outreach, et cetera. But these budgets should mostly cover staff time to provide small scale conservation technical assistance. And of course, all of this information is detailed in the RFP as well. We just want to give you sort of a rough understanding of some of what this program does. All right, so both of those grants, regardless of which one you're applying for, and again, I'm getting some background if you could mute yourself. Regardless of which grant you're applying for, you do have to contribute 25% of the budget in match, either in kind or cash, preferably. And that match can be volunteer time, board time, donations from other organizations, grants that you pulled in from other places that are eligible. So this is non-federal match. You can't use any federal grants, but if you receive a grant from a local bank, for example, for a community activity, that could be matched towards this program. And again, there's a lot of information in our FAQs about what that match looks like as well. So two specific requirements as well: supplies and equipment must be less than 15% of your NACD funds. So this is not an infrastructure grant. You cannot apply for these grants to get a new hoop house or irrigation equipment or anything like that for your local district or community garden or whatever the case may be. You can use some of the funds for supplies and equipment, but it must be less than 15%. And same with your administrative costs. Administrative costs would be anything related to hiring a new person, managing that person, submitting reports, et cetera. Those cannot go above 10% of your budget. All right, so one of the big questions that we get related to these grants is that we ask districts to showcase that they're working within their community. Obviously, urban and community, we want others to be engaged in this and not necessarily just the district. So one of the ways that we do that is to require partnership letters of community support, essentially, for your application. Planning grants are not necessarily required to submit letters. You can if you choose to, but implementation grants, you must submit at least one letter of recommendation to show that you have community buy-in for your grant. Those partnerships can be any number of organizations. Some of the common ones that we see in years past are faith-based organizations, youth groups like 4-H and FFA and Youth Works. Schools, of course, are huge partners through this program. And at schools, for example, that's where a lot of community projects may be cited. So that's an excellent partnership opportunity. Nonprofits, we see a lot of partnerships with food banks, veterans organizations. We're increasingly seeing districts responding to unhoused individuals and helping nonprofits that work with unsheltered, unhoused individuals and achieving food security goals with those populations. Local businesses like banks, banks, garden centers, national chains. Those tend to be excellent partners for the donation of materials and supplies. Occasionally, those type of organizations are looking for corporate bonding type activities. And so they may do a volunteer event with a site, a community garden, that kind of thing. And of course, cooperative extension, universities, community colleges, those all provide excellent resources as well for the technical side of things, as well as potentially sites for activities as well. And this is not a comprehensive list, of course. We encourage creative and different partnerships that may be new for the district especially. All right. So I want to go through a few key details here. I've mentioned multiple times that the application is due January 31st. This is a very important deadline. Please plan early. You have about a month and a half until this deadline. It's very common for our grants at NACD that we see most of our applications on January 31st at 11 p.m. But I'm not going to be able to answer your questions at that time. So please start reviewing everything quickly. Make sure you get on the site to review the application early so that you know what to expect, etc. We also require a board resolution showing support for the grant applications and activities. So what that looks like is essentially in your December, January board meeting, you can have your board vote on a resolution essentially that says they support the board activities. That just needs to be a letter or the actual resolution signed by the chair or president of your board, and that's submitted as part of your application. And we ask for that because it again showcases that this is not something you're just doing for a year. You're looking towards the long-term sustainability of this project as well. All right, so a few key questions that you need to make sure to answer within your application, as these are looked at very highly by the evaluation committee. One is, how would your UAC grant help achieve goals under your organization's long range or strategic plan? So again, we're looking for projects that are not going to just be a single year of the district's activities, but hopefully the district will be moving increasingly in a direction where they're addressing urban and community agriculture conservation issues over the long term for their region or district. We also look highly at applications that have a component of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So how will you partner or individually within your district support underrepresented clients or communities? So populations, for example, that your district has not previously looked at, some of which I've mentioned already, veterans organizations, unhoused individuals, adults with disabilities are also increasingly a group that we're seeing districts work with. People that maybe aren't representative of the standard farmer or rancher, forester, et cetera, that many of our conservation districts look to. Again, for implementation grants, we also require community letters of support, at least 1 up to 5. And these are really helpful, showing that, again, you've thought about your project for more than 1 year and you're looking to support your entire community as well. And we also have several questions on how you will fund the project after your NACD UAC grants. So these are grants that you can apply for 1 year, and then obviously you can apply again once you've completely finished your first project, but these are not grants that are going to sustain your program through time. So of course, with that sustainability question, we're asking for you to think about how this project may be funded after your NACD grant period. And that's very important to showcase that you've thought about other grant avenues, for example, donations, other partnership opportunities, et cetera, to showcase that this project will continue after the first year. And then previous grantees, you must also show how you've conducted ongoing activity for your first project without those NACD funds as well. All right, so a quick overview of our timeline. Again, January 31st, very important deadline. So make sure you have that on your calendar. Our evaluation team will review the proposals and select the applicants during the month of February. And then we'll notify all successful applicants in March and proceed through signing agreements with each district that is awarded a grant. And then successful grantees will be able to conduct their projects from April through March March of next year, with quarterly reports required as well through that time frame. All right, so I've mentioned a couple of key questions. Now I want to touch on a few things that may be helpful as you're developing your proposal as well. So for those of you that aren't aware, on NACD's website, we have a diversity, equity, and inclusion toolkit. There's a number of resources on there that may be helpful for thinking about how you may address needs of your underrepresented clients, et cetera. There's a lot of really great information in there that I highly recommend looking at as you're preparing your proposal. Within our members only section on our website. So as a reminder, every conservation district is a member of NACD. Those of you that pay your membership dues have access to a specific members only website that has many resources on it related to outreach, et cetera. But one that I think is really important in this context is funding resources. So within that section, you'll find a list of partnership organizations. And if you click on the drop down, it'll provide examples of grants that partner provides that conservation districts are eligible for. And again, you'll see some examples of conservation districts that have previously applied for those grants and received them. So there's a few in here, like the Agricultural Management Service, that some of our previous grantees, UAC grantees, have applied for and been successful with. So there may be some examples in there that could be useful for you as you're planning out the long-term sustainability of your project. And on our urban and community website, I've mentioned this multiple times already, but I just want to, again, emphasize that we have a list of previous grantee presentations, a link to blogs that highlight some of the programs through or projects through this program, a link to our YouTube that has networking videos from some of our previous grantees, and of course the webinars as well. So one of your greatest resources as you're developing your projects and proposals are other grantees, and many are very happy to share information about how they've conducted their own work. So I highly recommend taking a look at some of those. All right, prepare and apply early for your application. I cannot emphasize this enough. As the person that will be processing these applications, I welcome all of your questions, but of course, in a timely fashion and before January 31st. And so finally, before we open it up for questions, I just want to remind everybody to sign up for NACD's news, in particular, our weekly newsletter. If you don't receive this often features relevant information for people interested in urban and community agriculture. On the second Tuesday of every month, we do a spotlight of our previous urban ag grantees. So those, of course, are a great resource for learning about some of the other projects that are available. We also feature a number of webinars, grant activities, deadlines for our events, et cetera, within that newsletter. So definitely a great resource. And same with conservation clips, forestry notes, and the resource. All of those often feature information that could be helpful for all of you as well. All right, so hopefully all of you have my contact information, but if not, again, it's on this last slide here, which you'll receive when I send around the recording to all those who have registered. And now I will happily open it up to questions if anyone has any.
I don't see any questions in the chat box, Ariel, just monitoring that.
All right, thank you, Rich. I do see that as well. Yes, Betsy.
Hi, Ariel?
Mm-hmm.
Am I up? Okay, thank you. My question is this, when we submit our packet, which is normally electronically submitted, is there going to be any way that something that might not be easy to transmit electronically would be available to send as a supplemental packet?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So we accept the applications through SurveyMonkey, and on occasion, very rarely, people have had trouble uploading documents through that site. So if that happens, then you can feel free to email those attachments to me. So that may include your board resolution, for example, any of your letters, community letters of support. On occasion, people choose to submit maps of their site or pictures, things like that. All of those are acceptable supplemental materials, and you can just email those to me way before the deadline.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Betsy. All right, I see a couple of questions in the chat box. One is, would community rain gardens be fundable? And yes, if there's an agricultural component within those community rain gardens, those are definitely an acceptable project activity. Ashland SWCD, I believe in Ohio, comes to mind. They did community rain barrels as part of their project. So they're a great program to look at as an example of how they've handled it. You can learn more about some of the activities that they've had through their grant. And then Melissa, your question on what percentage of the budget can be allocated to training. We don't have a cap on that budget category, only on the supplies and equipment and administrative costs. But of course, we would hope that the training budget wouldn't be a huge portion of the grant. And like we said in the RFP, we're hoping that for the implementation grants that the staff time would be about 50% of the budget. So you can take a look at some of those numbers and how they shake out, and what makes the most sense for your training budget as well. All right, and Leanne, is it possible to get a variance on the 50% of the budget going towards salary, benefits, etc.? Leanne, why don't you come off mute and if you can, and maybe ask what you're thinking for that category.
Hello, Leanne just had to step out for a second, so I stepped in for her, but I think she was referring to, she didn't know if she would be able to meet the 50% towards salary. And so she was wanting more of her budget to go towards on the ground project and didn't know if that was possible.
Yeah, so as these grants are meant to cover conservation technical assistance, that's why we are hoping that most of the budget would go, or 50% at least, would go towards the staff time. So again, these are not meant to be implementation projects, or excuse me, infrastructure projects. So as long as things are within the limit of admin and supplies and equipment, that is something that the evaluation team will take into consideration. They have approved grant budgets, or budgets, excuse me, before that have gone over that 50%. This is actually the first year that we've added that requirement, because we were increasingly seeing districts kind of planning too much in terms of their funds not actually building district capacity. And initially these grants were meant to build district capacity so the district could continue to address urban and community agriculture through the long term. So it's a hard thing.
I might jump in on you there. We found our districts have found other sources of funding to do those infrastructure-like kinds of things. It's easier for our local community business to donate something physical or something mechanical or space or a lot or equipment. As Ariel is trying to emphasize here, we're trying to help districts build their capacity. And so there is a reason for it.
Great, thank you, Rich. And I wanted to mention as well that within the budget, it's a lot. Some of the expenses can go towards workshop activities, hiring, speaker fees, for example, honorariums for community ambassadors. So Pierce Conservation District in Washington has a really amazing community ambassador program, where essentially to work with non-English speaking community members, for example, Hmong or Korean or Vietnamese, they've found an individual within that community that they could train on specific specific aspects of conservation technical assistance. And that individual as a community ambassador would then go work with the underrepresented community essentially. So honorarium fees to cover that type of work are totally acceptable as well. And that can fall within the salary component. So you're not necessarily directly hiring somebody, but it does build long-term capacity of the district because you've identified a strategy for reaching those clients in a new and creative way. And Andrew, I see your question as well. So the bulk of the budget goes towards staffing. Is there a requirement to show funding sources for the overall program if only part of an FTE is requested? And no, we ask for generally what the match may be as part of your proposal, but we don't necessarily look for any commitments from any partnership organization or anything that would cover the other half of that FTE. But it's also acceptable for a district if they choose to only have a part-time person as part of their grant. That's totally acceptable as well. So Rhode Island, Eastern Rhode Island Conservation District right now has a program where they only have a part-time staff person working on pollinator gardens, and that makes the most sense for their district and their budget as well. And it's also not a requirement to ask for $50,000 for the implementation grants. If it makes sense to only have a grant that's $30,000 and say 15 of that goes towards a part-time staff person or a quarter-time staff person, and then the other half goes towards workshop activities, etc., that's totally acceptable as well. All right. I see we do have a few grantees, previous grantees on the line, and they don't know that I'm going to ask them to do this, but I will ask a few of you to come on and maybe discuss your first project and your experience through that as well. So Jody, are you available to maybe describe some of your district's activities?
Yes. I apologize. I just turned on my video from our holiday party on Friday. Sorry about that. Yeah, we just wrapped up our projects in June, and we're considering putting another application in for this next round. Our focus was working with a community garden here in Eastern Washington and supporting their efforts doing education at the garden. We did some workshops focused on composting and plant pests. We also had a rain barrel component too that we tied in with that. We did some focus on pollinators. So we installed 2 native plant plots to serve as a showcase to the community. All native plants local to the area, and then 2 interpretive signs, hosted some volunteer days there as well. We hosted a pollinator kind of bio blitz situation of in-person event, having folks come out and capture pollinators and ID them. So yeah, that's kind of, we worked closely with the board to put that on, talk to them about some needs that they had with their with recruitment. We also worked on an outreach video for them. When we initially wrote the grant, it was before COVID, so we pivoted quite a bit to continue programming, but that was kind of the basic overview of our project. So.
Thank you, Jody. And would you mind describing a little bit about your heritage site as well and where you conduct some of your activities?
Yeah, so the site is, yeah, it's, well, so the in-person site was at a community garden, which is right next to a river. We were able to tie in a riparian restoration component as well. And so when we were able to do in person, we held some events there, but a lot of it ended up being on Zoom as well, doing recordings. So, and we are a small population university town here, about 30,000 total, and we have a lot of students. We have a transient population as well. That was one idea at the end of the project, was trying to think of ways that we could bring in more of a diversity and inclusion element of working with the transient populations that are there. The garden members rent their plots from May until September. So it's a nice short window of being able to do some programming over the winter, and then working on programming in the summer while they're actually at their plots. And there's not necessarily like a great, I know that the garden's working on this, of like having some turnover of like doing soil health practices to prepare for the next season. But that was also possibly another goal, is working towards helping some longevity of the garden. So, yeah.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing, Jody. And we do, we have funded several projects as well that focus on beginning farmer training programs. So Prince George's Soil Conservation District in Maryland is a great example if anyone is thinking about sort of the longevity in terms of who their next farmers will be. And Fairbanks in Alaska has also done some youth training, garden training. So these are all great projects as well to think about longevity from that standpoint too. So just wanted to highlight those as well. Thank you for sharing, Jody. All right, Anne from San Diego, are you, I believe that would be you from RCD San Diego. Would you mind sharing?
Hi, yeah, that's me. Hello, everyone. Yeah, we got one of the early grants, I think, probably the first year of the program, to expand a community garden that we have run since 2002. And we've always had a huge waiting list. It's always been totally oversubscribed. So the grant, we got another grant to do the infrastructure piece to expand the garden, but the grant that we got through NACD helped us work with gardeners on efficient irrigation, composting, a whole bunch of different training things, and to do a lot of like the community work to prepare people for the expansion as well, and involve gardeners in decisions about how that project took place. And we also planned and later implemented a pollinator hedgerow at the back of the garden, and included some plots for small scale farmers, kind of like almost like incubator plots, so quarter-acre plots for new or small scale farmers. So it really helped us get that program off the ground and do a lot of that education and outreach.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing.
No problem.
Bill, I saw your question, where in Georgia, but our two previous speakers were from Washington and California. So I wanted to make sure that.
I might have heard that wrong. I was writing some notes. I thought you said there were some example projects in Georgia that you were referring to.
We did. I didn't actually mention one. So we have had
I'm in Florida, but if they're next door. And I thought someone said Georgia, that's all. Or if you got Florida, I'm in Florida. So
that's Betsy. Yeah, we have had a few in Georgia. So definitely take a look at the ArcGIS map on our website. Those were some of our earlier projects as well. And I can't remember specifics exactly of what they did through their projects, but great examples for sure. And Betsy, since you are in Florida, you always have great ideas of partnership ideas as well. So I may switch over to you and see if you have a few suggestions as well as of some of the partnership activities that you've done through your district. Oh, shoot. Yeah, let me you're on mute. Let me
Sorry.
There you go.
Hi, Ariel. Sorry about that. I was just going to say, if he's in Florida, he can give us a call. We were fortunate enough to get the first grants given out in 2016, and we were able to start a program we call the Hillsborough 100 Conservation Challenge. This happens between Earth Day, Arbor Day, and Soil Stewardship Week. It's a 3-week program. It consists of about 100 different projects. And part of what we do a garden challenge, which is at 26 schools right now, which we hope to increase to over 50 schools, and add a composting element. But we also do all kinds of programs, projects, activities. We put out a 28-page color tabloid as part of our program. We self-fund it right now. Since we got our original grant, we've been fortunate to have the corporate support to self-fund, but of course we're interested now because we want to double the size of schools we're approaching for our garden challenge. But in addition to that, we're in all the fairs and festivals around Florida. And I got to give a plug. If anybody comes to the convention, and I hope everybody does, that they'll come over to the Florida State Fair, because we're going to have a major exhibit there for the first time ever. We normally just have a regular 10 to 20 foot exhibit, but we're actually going to have a 30 by 60 foot exhibit called Conservation is Everybody's Business. And the fair is going on at the same time as the National Convention. So hopefully people will take one of the tours over and come see us in Tampa Bay.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And thanks for the plug for our annual meeting as well. So for those of you that aren't aware, the early bird registration deadline ends tomorrow. So make sure to get your registrations in this evening or tomorrow. But essentially, we are hosting our first in-person annual meeting since 2019 in Orlando, Florida, February 12th through 16th. So we have a variety of activities for districts that are incredibly helpful in terms of breakout sessions, general sessions, legislative affairs updates, all kinds of things that are helpful for districts, but a lot of networking opportunities as well. So we have a Urban Ag Grantee coffee where all of you can come together, or anyone interested in urban ag can come together, learn from each other. We have several breakout sessions as well. One this year will focus on marketing and selling your urban ag program, and we'll have a conservation symposium as well, focused specifically on partnerships and once you do sell your program. All right, so do we have any additional comments or any others who have received a previous grant that would like to share information about their program? Not seeing any, but I want to make sure to provide the opportunity. Yes, Kim, I see you have your hand up.
Okay, there you go. Hold on. Can you hear me with my headphones on, or should I? Okay, I have occasional Zoom meetings where the headphone does not work. So I'm with the Okanagan Conservation District, and we received a grant, I think in 2018, maybe 2019. And we did school gardens was kind of the main focus on ours. We partnered with a local NGO, Classroom Bloom, and worked with what started off as 3 school gardens, and then it kind of grew to 4. We did teacher trainings, we did the technical assistance to get gardens going, teacher surveys to talk about garden barriers. We created a curriculum, and then kind of a school garden starter packet. And since then, actually, we now have 8 school gardens in the county, so we've doubled. And that's kind of why I'm coming to this to kind of think about how can we continue to provide technical assistance for 8 schools rather than 4. So we've grown, which is pretty exciting. Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah, congratulations on the growth of that program. And I would like to emphasize as well that many grantees do partners with schools. And for a few years, we had for this specific grant, the Urban Ag Conservation Grant, some people started to think of it specifically as a school garden grant. That's, while we certainly love to see those type of programs and love to see especially the curriculum development and training and involvement of youth within their own food security, we certainly welcome all types of projects that go beyond just those schools. So for example, I mentioned universities is a great partner. We have, I'm based in California, and one of our grantees here in California, local to me, has started working with a university and a local tribe to address issues related to tribal food security while using the university site as an opportunity for those tribal individuals to produce their own native crops. So there's a wealth of creative ideas out there, most of which I'm not even going to remember. So again, I highly recommend looking at that map and thinking about some of the new and interesting ways that you might be able to address community agriculture conservation in your own area. All right. Any additional questions or comments? All right. Well, if we don't have anything else, Rich, do you have any closing thoughts or comments that you'd like to share with the group?
Well, very briefly, thank you, Ariel, for doing a super job of outlining this opportunity. Thank all of the folks, 40-some folks that were on the webinar. We're always appreciative of interest, even if you don't apply for this particular opportunity. There are so many other services that we might be engaged on, and you've got an opportunity to hear from Ariel about those as well. And we look forward to receiving those applications before January 31, so that there's time to get them to the review team and do a good job of that. Aside from that, Ariel and Ron, I think we have been so pleased with the opportunity to do this a 6th year in a row now, that I'm optimistic that we'll be building on this for many years in the future. So thank you again, Ariel, for doing such a super job, and thanks to everyone for participating.
Thank you, Rich. I really appreciate it. Ron, do you have any closing thoughts for the group as well?
I just want to say I just appreciate the attendance and some of the questions, and I just reiterate what Ariel said. You know, if you're looking at a project, go onto the story map, look at some of the projects that were done, investigate them. I think, you know, Bill, you're asking about Georgia. If I remember, we had 2 projects come to mind. One was in a very rural community, and one was in Atlanta. 2 extremely different communities, different projects, both super successful. But I would say, of the many grantees that I've met over the years, particularly at the coffee that we have at the annual meeting, they want to share their experience. You know, call them up, email them, really, pick their brains. It's a phenomenal resource of district staff people or volunteers that work with that I think they're more than happy to share their experiences, what they've learned, what they could do. And the list of partners that these folks have partnered with is just absolutely amazing. People you would have never thought to partner with that come out of the woodwork when some of these projects come on. And so, there's no holds barred there. So again, thanks a lot, and looking to see some really great projects here in the next grant round.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ron. And thank you to Annika as well, our Northeast region rep, who put her email address in the chat box for any of you in the Northeast. She's an excellent resource and new to NACD, but incredibly enthusiastic. So make sure to capture that energy while you can. And on that note, all of you should have my email address by now, but I will certainly send around the recording and the presentation to all of you that registered for today's webinar info session as well. And I look forward to seeing your applications and questions as well. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day.